You know the saying, what goes up must come down. And I'm wondering if that's true for inflation.
So, inflation is a measure of the change in average prices, right? Or you could say, an aggregate or a combination of all prices. So, what you're saying may well hold true for some prices for some things, especially, let's say, commodities. Coffee prices, lumber prices, even gasoline prices are the kinds of things that we know go up and down, right, for a variety of reasons. And we've experienced that regularly. What we're seeing with the inflation rate right now is that across a broad array of prices, on average, they all tend to be, or lots of them tend to be going up at a fairly remarkable rate. So policymakers are attempting to bring that rate of inflation down. Their goal is to bring it from where it is around 8% per year down to closer to 2%. That's their stated policy, such as the Federal Reserve. But even at a 2% inflation rate, which is the kind of what we experienced prior to the pandemic, we still have some prices going up and some prices going down. And so, and that's normal. That's typical. Uh, that being the case, even if the Fed achieves its goal of bringing inflation back down to around 2% per year, we will still see some prices elevated. We will still see some prices growing over time.
Can you get specific? Is there something specific that you might tell someone, hey, this has gone up and it's probably going to be something you just need to start budgeting for because it's probably going to stay expensive?
Right. From what it looks to me, it appears that what we're seeing in the inflation numbers right now are the growing importance of services inflation. So the prices of services, think restaurants, hotels, a lot of travel related, think healthcare, even veterinary services have seen increases, remarkable increases recently. Because those services are often very labor intensive, those price increases, at least in large part, are reflecting increases in wages and the tightness of the labor market. Uh, I don't see any sign of that going away in the immediate future. And so those services prices will, I think, tend to be quite sticky going forward.
I read somewhere recently that when those restaurant prices go up, they often stay up also because customers they eventually get used to it. We might complain at first, but we get used to it, we get comfortable with it, comfortable spending $5 on a cup of coffee, so they just don't go back down. Because there's is that something that rings true to you?
Yes, I think that makes a lot of sense. Um, a lot of retailers, a lot of businesses who are facing high input prices, whether it be for labor or raw materials or what have you, uh, are tasked with trying to figure out what can they pass along to their customers. How much and in what ways. If they learn that they can pass along those costs and not lose a whole lot of business or not lose a whole lot of market share, then that's a signal to them that that price can remain where it is.
Now, people are going to want to know how much longer do we think it's just going to keep rising? Is there an end in sight? Is there a cap that you guys have seen? Like, could inflation just keep going? Like, people want to know what's the end.
That's a very good question and a very difficult one to answer. Um, it's not obvious to me when the end point of the current elevated inflation will be. I think one thing that we should remember and that policymakers are certainly aware of is that a lot of the policies that are being put into place now, think about the interest rate increases that the Federal Reserve are adopting, those tend to have effects that are lagged. The actual impact of those changes won't show up in markets and in the measured data for a number of months, for several quarters at least. And so the interest rate rises that we're seeing this fall may not have their full impact until well into next spring. So it's very hard to forecast then what things will look like then or even a year from now when the decisions that are taking place now have those, what they say, long and variable lags.
So, as an economist, I would love to know what you think people should do to adjust. It could be like you said, there are certain things that just won't drop. So, how should people start rebudgeting or reworking their finances to adjust accordingly?
Right. I think consumers and households should budget in much the way they always have. That is, to think about priorities, to think about what is a necessity and what is not, to think about, saving for the future in much the same way they always have. Um, Inflation can make it harder to budget carefully. It can make it harder to save for the future, uh, but the goals do not change. And so I don't think it calls for a radical change in behavior. That said, when people are thinking about their savings, when they're thinking about saving for the future, saving to buy a home, saving uh, to, to pay for college or other retirement or other purposes, there are vehicles that are more or less protected from the effects of inflation, and those should definitely be explored at this time.
And what would those be? Just give a few examples.
Right. Well, I'm not a financial advisor, so I don't want to be giving too much specific advice. But holding cash right now, right, keeping your savings in cash form, is probably a bad idea because even though the markets can be quite volatile, and they are right now, what inflation does in its very definition is an erosion in the purchasing power of uh, of paper currency of the currency. And so holding savings in cash or highly liquid forms can be very costly right now.
Interesting. Okay. So let's say someone's asking for a cost of living adjustment for their employer. Usually, I think I people used to say that's about 2.5%. Hey, can I get a raise? I gotta adjust. What
Right.
would that number be in today's market?
Right. Well, I'm sure most employees would like to get as much as they can, and I would not blame them for doing so. I think the question becomes uh, to what extent that cost of living is specific to the location in which they live. So we see uh, the headline inflation rate that refers to kind of a national average. But a lot of employers, when making these cost of living adjustments, try to pinpoint those those changes, those cost of living increases by geographic area. So maybe some of those price pressures that are experienced in one part of the country are a little less so in another. But it's clearly the case that the typical 2 or 2.5% is well below what's happening to prices now.
Interesting. Okay. That's about all the questions that I had. But is there anything you want people to know about what's going on? Because I would say having parents that just recently retired, I
Right.
know how scary it can be for them. They are freaking out about everything right now. So is there anything you
Sure.
would like to touch on with inflation?
Right. I would say just in general, your example is a good one. Not to freak out, right? Because I think we make bad decisions, bad economic and financial decisions when we freak out. Um, and so it's a good time to get good advice. And so for those who have just retired or are planning retirement soon, to see a financial planner or a financial advisor to find ways to best weather these changes and this kind of volatility. But it's not a time to get wild and crazy in one way or another. That usually leads to disaster.
Very true. All right. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.